Hey everybody, Plushie here. So after having an in-depth talk about Kama, I think it's only fair to also bring up her other Beast 3 counterpart, Kiara, who is by the way also unrated right now. Now Kiara is a servant who has been in the game for even longer than Kama, but she did receive multiple buffs over the past years. Does she still hold up in today's meta, or is she power crept, just like her CQ, reduced to a node for milking content? Let's find out in this review of Kiara. So now let's take a look at her skills. So her first skill is a 50 MP battery that also reduces a single enemy's darts resist down by 30% for one turn, as well as their debuff resistance for one turn. Her second skill is an AoE defense down by 30% for 3 turns. It also removes all the enemy's buffs, as well as drain them by 1 gauge. Her third skill is an invul that also increases her crit damage, MP generation, debuff resistance, and healing received by 50% all for 1 turn, as well as carrying a demerit of 3000 HP. As for her passive skills, the two more significant ones is Logo's Eater, that increases her own defense against humanoid enemies by 16%, and Nega Saver, that grants self-attack advantage against ruler classes, which deals 1.5 times damage against them instead of the 1 time damage normal alter egos should do. And finally, her MP is Amida Amidila Heaven's Hole. It is an AoE Arts MP that is upgraded, that deals ignore invincibility and ignore defense damage against all enemies, as well as heal herself according to her overcharge. Now the heal numbers are pretty big, and it scales from 5,000 all the way up to 10,000. As a DPS servant, I think Kiara is pretty good. I personally have a soft spot for servants that have full ignore MPs, meaning that the MP can pierce invul, pierce evade, and ignore defense. And that preference stems pretty much from my experience using Kiara. Being able to ignore the majority of defensive gimmicks in a fight is perhaps more convenient than you first think. It allows you to not worry much about the team comp, and not having to fill in servants that specifically deal with these gimmicks, and instead focus on damage, which sometimes she lacks. On top of that, she also has an AoE buff removal skill that can further remove any kinds of buff the enemies try to put on themselves, either a defensive buff to further increase their defensiveness, or offensive buff that tries to finish you off early. To put it simply, she has all the tools to deal with any common gimmick a fight can have to disrupt your game plan. As for looping, Kiara has a big 50 MP battery, as well as an MP gain up effect on her third skill, allowing her to pretty easily tackle farming cavalry class enemies, especially riders and casters. She might need some help though when facing berserkers and even assassins sometimes if your MP level is not high enough for overkill. I suggest bring Black Rail in these cases, or MP start CEs if you're facing berserkers. With not a lot of good looping assassins especially, Kiara might be your best friend when farming rider nodes. However, on the flip side, she gets shut down almost immediately whenever knight classes are thrown into the mix. But I suppose that is just a common sin of all alter ego servants. One of Kiara's most unique attributes is her Nega Saver passive skill. This is perhaps one of the most impactful passive skills in the game, allowing her to do 1.5 times effective damage against rulers instead of the neutral damage all other alter egos do to rulers. This allows her to fit in the role of a pseudo Avenger and can take on ruler class bosses with relative ease, especially considering a lot of ruler class bosses focus on more defensive skill sets such as spamming invul and defense ups, where she can easily ignore with her MP. Obviously, she would not perform nearly as well as an actual Avenger, seeing the advantage is only 1.5 times instead of 2, and she takes neutral damage instead of half. But if you want to invest in only a small amount of servants, having a wider array of counterclasses is always great. What a lot of people fail to mention and overlook is Kiara's ability to solo. After her MP upgrade, her heal on MP is boosted to a very impressive 5000, and it even further increases with overcharge. Paired with her third skill and heal up CCs, especially when you use the third skill with barely any HP, so the 3000 demerit isn't fully cashed out, the healing can quickly get out of control. And while she does not have any sort of the sustain, Simply the loopability of her MP can keep her at relatively high HP at all times. She also does have her third skill to block off MPs, although it does have a lot of other effects, so sometimes saving it just for an enemy MP might seem a little bit wasteful. Her passive skill, Logos Eater, that increases her defense by 16% against humanoid enemies, also helps quite a bit. Considering how many servants are considered humanoid, this skill can apply in almost every situation, and it helps a lot, especially if the fight drags on for long enough. She excels in fights that doesn't straight up kill you with single bursts of damage, such as, ironically, unnerfed Big Kiara, or better known as Demonic Bodhisattva, where she can simply equip a heal up CE and out-heal her enemy's damage. Now with all the good I have to say about Kiara out of the way, let's talk about the flaws. First of all, Kiara has a lot of one-turn only buffs, and I do not like one-turn only buffs, especially not on arch servants who like to go on semi-stally compositions. The single target arts down for one turn on her skill 1 is awkward, the number is small, and is overall not worth considering when timing the skill. I have no idea what they were thinking when they gave an AoE arts DPS servant a single target 30% arts down, but I guess we'll have to take what we have. Secondly, her third skill, while impressive with its plethora of effects, is once again very awkward to time. Do you use it to boost your MP gain to ensure another MP on the next turn? Do you use it to boost your crit damage because you happen to have stars and 2 buster cards? Or do you simply hold on to it for an emergency out when your enemy is about to MP? Having the flexibility to do all of that is great and all, but at the same time it usually whiffs half of its effects due to the timing problem and the fact that all effects last only one turn. The skill is also designed to be used on an MP turn to counteract the demerit. However, if you're forced to defend when you do not have your MP ready, the 3000 HP demerit suddenly becomes very real, especially considering if you're doing it in a solo scenario. Another sin that really isn't the problem with Kiara herself is the timing of her banner. Kiara is currently on rate up right now in JP, and we can most likely expect a Summer 6 rerun event soon. As for NA, the Yoka rerun event will probably drop soon in the second half of the year, with Heian-Kyo coming not too long after. And in both incoming events, holds in my opinion the current strongest alter ego servant in the entire game, Ashia Dolman. I will not go into detail regarding why I think he's the strongest, but just note that he's one of the best supports in the game when the alignment match, as well as being an insane crit DPS, crooked node farmer, and even solo servant. If you ever want to invest in one alter ego, he is it. Despite all the praises I sung for Kiara as a DPS, she simply does not come close to the versatility of Dolman, and I cannot in good faith recommend pulling for her over him, in a gameplay perspective at least, especially if you're on a budget. Overall, Kiara in my opinion is still a very good servant. She is simple to use and have a lot of tools to deal with whatever the enemy can throw at her. She's a decent farmer as well as a super effective solo unit with massive heals. However, she still has clear flaws in her awkward skills and short effect durations. And finally, a combination of the limitations of the alter ego class itself and the monster of a unit Dolman in the alter ego sphere, potentially coming soon, prevents me from recommending her as highly as Kama. I want to talk a little bit more about alter egos here, as this section was originally included in the flaws section of this video, but I don't think it's really fair, as this is a flaw shared by all alter ego servants and not just Kiara. I never liked the class alignment of alter egos because of the dealing half damage to all knight classes part. I don't think it's really a fair trade-off for only being able to do 1.5 type damage against all cavalry classes. This flaw is especially prevalent in challenge quest settings, as they really like to mix and match classes. Even having one knight class in a cavalry majority based CQ can really throw your whole game plan out of the window. That is once again one of the reasons why I tend to recommend other extra classes that hit universally in most cases. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope this video helped you even a little bit on deciding whether to roll for Kiara or not, and to the best of luck to all of you who decides to roll for Kiara. I'll see you guys in the next video.